These are the tear shells which is being fired by the local police and the para commandos who are trying to control the situation, and more deployment is also being moved towards. The stones which are being pelted from the protesters' side. There are thousands of protesters who have come here from the Gulf face, and they came here. They wanted to move towards the residence, private residence of the Prime Minister of the country, Ranil Wikremesinghe, but the police officials have so far managed to control and stop them.
The churn in Sri Lanka continues. Protests that began earlier this year and intensified towards April have now forced Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president of Sri Lanka until the 15th of July, to flee the country. This marks a big shift in Sri Lankan politics, ending the stranglehold that the Rajapaksha family held over the state of affairs in the country for a long time. The whereabouts of Gotabaya Rajapaksa were initially in doubt on the 9th of July when protesters stormed Colombo fort, the area that houses the presidential residence and offices. It was being widely speculated that he would be fleeing the country then. It was only during the subsequent week that it emerged that he had fled to Malé, the capital of the Maldives, and by the end of the week was in Singapore. The Singapore government clarified that he was there as a visitor and not seeking asylum. So what would his final destination now be?
It was a D-Day for the people of Sri Lanka who had managed to capture the office of President of Sri Lanka, where I am standing, as well as the President's house, the Prime Minister's house. But before the actual countdown could begin, Gotabaya Rajapaksa has left the country in the wee hours. This is the information which broke early morning, and later to that it has also been confirmed from the Prime Minister's office, which means that Ranil Wikremesinghe, the Prime Minister of the country, is still there in position. What we have got to know that the fleet of Gotabaya Rajapaksa landed at the Malé airport through the Air Force aircraft, and we have also visuals, exclusive visuals access of this VVIP cavalcade moving from there. But in the meanwhile, look at the visuals. All these people and supporters are still gathered here. They have been here in large number throughout the night, and it's been more than 3 months since these Sri Lankans have been waiting for Gotabaya to step down from his position.
I don't know, people rejected him. So today people tried to chase him away, but he left the country today without telling.
How do you see your future? You must be studying in college.
Yeah.
How do you see your future from now? Because the country is going through such a bad phase.
I'm trying to leave the country. Yeah, because
You're trying to?
Leave the country.
You're trying to leave the country?
Yeah, leave the country. Because I don't think there is no future. There is a future here.
Very sad thing, very sad statement coming out from these students who don't have any other options left. And talk to them. Gotabaya has left.
He left from the country, so we are waiting for the new presidents. So as soon as we are waiting for the new presidents, Gota, go home.
You want a new, who should be the ideal president? You want honest people to be made.
The other peoples to be here, but we need the good people of the, like Ranil Wikremesinghe is a good talent.
Celebrations in the air at the village which was known as Gotabaya, right next to the President's Secretariat, where all these protesters have actually started celebrating for the cause for which they have been protesting here for the last 97 days. They also left those important installations, including the President's house and the Prime Minister's house and their offices, after they announced that it was their location, and after the siege, the locations were open. But Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the moment he entered Singapore, he issued a statement through the embassy, and that message was also given to the Speaker's office here, and the Speaker's office has confirmed it to the Times Network that Gotabaya Rajapaksa has officially resigned from the post of the President of Sri Lanka. Sadly, this village, which started from few of the protesters, emerged into relax, and then they barge inside the president's office and the president's secretariat have managed to concord it for the cause for which they have been fighting. In the due course of time, Speaker will be announcing the date on which all these party leaders will be moving their candidate for the presidential election, which is expected to happen on 19th, and later to that on 20th, Sri Lanka, the island city, will officially have its new president of the country. In the meanwhile, the celebration continues here in Colombo.
This was brewing for quite some time. While a popularly elected president, Sri Lanka's descent into financial doldrums directly as a result of the government's flawed economic policies meant that it was only a matter of time before Gotabaya Rajapaksa would have to quit. The legitimacy that the Rajapakshas enjoyed diminished to such an extent in the eyes of the Sri Lankan public that his older brother, Mahinda Rajapaksa, had to step down in May from the post of Prime Minister. Mahinda Rajapaksha was president when the decades-long civil war against the LTTE ended, following a ruthless assault by the Sri Lankan forces in the north and the east of the country. Rajapaksha became a national hero, and so did his brother Gotabaya, who was the defense secretary at the time. So deeply invested was the Rajapaksha family in Sri Lankan politics, and so greatly did they influence its government, that during Mahinda Rajapaksha's second term as president between 2010 and 2015, there were more than 40 members of his family in government posts and cabinet positions. When Gotabaya became president, his family occupied 11 ministerial positions, including another brother, Basil, who was finance minister. The Rajapaksas have been dynasts with a political presence dating back to the time of Sri Lankan independence and its first parliament, where Mahinda and Gotabaya's father, Don Alvin Rajapaksha, was a member of parliament. Following the defeat of the LTTE, as the Rajapaksha stock grew even further, the family was widely accused of promoting an aggressive Sinhala nationalism and indulging in cronyism, leading to dramatic levels of corruption. There was an increasing reliance on China, and the Chinese presence in the region grew significantly through investments in infrastructure, ports, and long-term lease agreements. So much so that the Sri Lankan economy fell into a Chinese debt trap. China accounts for about 10% of Sri Lanka's external debt.
Sri Lanka's crisis has its sources in domestic politics. You cannot blame country A, B, C, D, E, etc. The governors of this country, the rulers of this country, who had a mandate, they had a trusteeship. They were temporary custodians, guardians of this country. But they ruined this country through impractical, lunatic decision-making. They embarked on a policy of voodoo economics, and they were experimenting with the 22 million people of the country. I don't blame any other nation state other than the government that has completely brought this country into chaos, and it has brought down to the precipice of disaster.
What initially seemed an impossibility, the fall from grace of the Rajapaksha clan has been swift, and there's been much anger on the streets of Sri Lanka. The insistence for a long time on the part of Gotabaya to continue as president riled the protesters even more. As a compromise, Mahinda stepped down and Ranil Wikremesinghe was appointed Prime Minister. But this appointment too was undertaken by a man who carried no legitimacy in the eyes of the people. The protesters on the streets of Colombo wanted both Gotabaya and Wikremesinghe to go.
After the day-long clash which kept on happening in Sri Lanka, now everyone from the opposition party in the all-party meeting has demanded resignation of Ranil Wikremesinghe. There was a high-level all-party meet which happened inside the parliament where the opposition leaders have also put forward their demand. In the meanwhile, the protesters also attempt to attack the parliament and they wanted to siege it These are the visuals which are quite clearly coming out from Sri Lanka. This is the office of the President of Sri Lanka. This is the Secretariat, which is also at siege. The protesters have been indulging in violence time and again, and what they are saying that they want Ranil Wikremesinghe also to step down from his position as the interim president. In the meanwhile, the international community, the United Nations, has also come up and has stated that Sri Lanka need to come out with the solution for the primary issue which has been escalating and which has come up over the period of few days. Gotabaya Rajapaksa kept on throwing his tantrum. He was expected to resign and send a letter to the Speaker of the House, but that didn't happen because Gotabaya apparently wanted a private jet to fly to Singapore. He had made it very clear that he's not going to fly in the Singapore airline amidst the protests which have been continuing against him, even while he is in Maldives. So the turn of events will certainly decide that what is going to be the fate of Sri Lanka, but the Speaker has to decide that on which date there will be election for the new appointment of the President and Prime Minister of the country.
Following the siege of the presidential palace and also the ransacking of the Prime Minister's private residence and the chaos that has reigned in the country, which is in a state of limbo, there is anxiety about how Sri Lanka's politics will now pan out.
We are reporting from Colombo, and the situation has certainly gone out of our control. And as you can see, these are the tear shells which is being fired by the local police and the para commandos who are trying to control the situation. And more deployment is also being moved towards. The stones which are being pelted from the protesters' side. There are thousands of protesters who have come here. Ranil Wikremesinghe could be swearing in as the new president of Sri Lanka, and to oppose that, this is a massive escalation which has started. All these security personnel are wearing their tear masks. The chief of the staff is already here. There have been plenty of tear shells which is being fired on the protesters who are attempting to march here. The situation has certainly gone out of control.
I want to be very emphatic when I state that I only support peaceful, calm, democratic protest, which protects the freedom of speech, the freedom of gathering, the freedom to demonstrate. That is what I champion. I don't champion terrorism committed to vandalize public and private property. That is terrorism. And I condemn it. I abhor it. So basically speaking, it is Ranil Wikremesinghe whose intransigent approach, whose inflexibility, whose stubbornness has created this stalemate. He is responsible and he is accountable.
Constitutionally, once the president resigned, which Gotabaya Rajapaksa did on the 15th of July, the Prime Minister takes over as interim president.
Thousands of protesters have moved from the Gulf face and they are moving towards a location because what they have got to know that Ranil Wikremesinghe will be swearing in as the new president. Where are you going with it?
We are heading to Royal College because we heard that Prime Minister is now going to appoint as an acting president. So we as a protesters, we are refusing him. We not allow that person to become an acting president in Sri Lanka for next 6 months.
But Wikremesinghe himself faces a serious crisis of credibility. If both resign, then the Speaker takes over as the interim president. The leader of the opposition in Sri Lanka, Sajith Premadasa, is also an alternative.
I have always preferred the electoral path to political power. It should be the wish of the majority that should reign. However, under the current circumstances, if a situation occurs that there will be a contest within Parliament for these positions of power, since the country is in a very difficult state and we need to extricate our country from this disaster and this quagmire, yes, I will come forward for a contest in Parliament. Both President Rajapaksha and Prime Minister Wikremesinghe have held Sri Lanka and its people to ransom. Millions and millions of people of our country are requesting both of them to go, to get out, to leave Sri Lanka so that people won't suffer any longer. But both of them continue to ignore the people's wish. So I absolutely have no idea when they will leave government. Both are clinging to power. Both are power hungry. And both do not care for the people of our country.
Look at the force. The crowd has just managed to push these police personnel.
While it is unambiguously clear that the protesters want to see the back of both Gotabaya and Wikremesinghe, who do they really want in power? There is even worry that the Sri Lankan military might seek to fill the political vacuum.
After the series of clashes which happened in between the protesters and the armed personnel, now army has been brought on the ground with the tanks. Yesterday, the army personnel faced a huge issue because of all these protesters trying to, push them, shove them away. They were not given instructions to open fire on them. And as you can see, near the parliament, these are the tanks of the Sri Lankan army along with the commandos of Sri Lankan army who have reached here. It is very important to see that what is going to happen next, because so far the protesters once again attempted to seize the parliament, and before the parliament session could actually begin, there has been an attempt by the protesters to disrupt the situation. A series of army tanks are quite visibly seen on the ground here in Colombo, where the army personnel are moving along with these tanks. The protesters have certainly destroyed multiple things, and to stop that, the army, along with the tank, has been brought on the ground in Colombo.
India has extended all possible financial aid to Sri Lanka to the tune of more than $3 billion, provided fuel and food supplies, and has been carefully watching what's been unfolding in the country. It has backed the constitutional process to be upheld.
I would like to thank India, the Indian government, the Indian people, and the Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi for the extraordinary help and assistance which has supported the sustenance of the people of my motherland. 22 million people of Sri Lanka are grateful that India has intervened to the best of her ability to provide significant support to help the Sri Lankan economy, to help prop up the basic human needs of the Sri Lankan people. So we are ever so grateful to India.
Sri Lanka's economic crisis has no quick fix solutions, and its own Prime Minister Mr. Wikremesinghe has said it could take up to 4 years to stabilize. Whoever replaces Gotabaya in the near future has their task cut out, for there's enough anger on the ground to claim another president if things do not improve.